Can't Knock the Shuffle, episode 7. Thank you all so much for the support and the great feedback. I've had such a great time, not just making this show, but seeing people connect and respond to it has been just as rewarding. So if you haven't done so already, please make sure that you comment and that you rate and subscribe the show and help further amplify the message so more people can hear it, and I'd come back and do it for a second season. All right, enough talk. Here we go. Next episode. Woo! Welcome to Can't Knock the Shuffle. I am Sean Kantrowitz. I'm a music producer. I'm a TV producer, the host of a hip-hop game show called The Questions, and I'm kind of obsessed with how songs get made. As a fan, I've always noticed that artists typically only get asked about the same handful of songs throughout their entire career. It's always made me wonder, what about the stories behind those lesser-known songs, the ones that journalists tend to overlook? And in my experience, those unheard stories are the ones that the artists really want to talk about anyway. So that's why Can't Knock the Shuffle exists. I take an artist's entire catalog, I put it in a playlist, throw it on shuffle, and then we talk about whichever songs are randomly selected. We take the interview angle out of the equation and leave it up to the algorithm to dictate which stories get told. This episode's guest is Columbus, Ohio's very own Blueprint. As a guy who himself wears many hats, I have nothing but respect for Prince's polymath game, as it were. The rapper and producer runs his own label, Weightless Recordings, and he's toured and collaborated with some of the best indie artists in the game for the past 2 decades. I met Blueprint years ago and helped him get set up with what would turn out to be a recurring string of tours through the state of Florida, where I was living at the time. And I connected with him through our shared sense of humor and appreciation for all things creative and technical. Prince's career success isn't just because he makes good music. He's always been open to adapting and expanding his skill set, as evidenced not just through the evolution of his sound in his catalog throughout the years, but through the other outlets that he's used to express himself, especially recently. He just published his 4th book, The 10 Traits of Successful Hip-Hop Artists. He directs music videos and films, and he also hosts his own podcast, Super Duty Tough Work, which also is on the Stony Island Audio Network. All right, enough talk. Let's get to, well, I guess more talk, but this time with my guest, Blueprint. Has the act of hosting a podcast changed the way that you feel now when you do interviews and you are a guest on somebody else's show? Do you have like a new appreciation or sense about those things?
It's probably the opposite, because I don't want to do interviews as much since I talk every week for an hour. I'm like, I'm not doing no interviews, bruh. No.
All right, cool. Well, I'm glad that the check cleared before this one. So it's good that we got you all.
Your people called my people. They cleared you, and I was like, you know what? He seems nice. And he's got the bag, so I'll do it. Podcast payola.
Podcast Familia right here on the Stony Island network. You are an artist who has a pretty interesting and long catalog. A lot of the artists and people that we've had on the show, it's all about the interesting twists and turns and the different arcs. And you're an artist who has a lot of that. You have a lot of different chapters and phases, putting out music for, by my estimation, almost 20 years, professionally. Yeah.
Yep. Right at 20 years.
Wow. So let's get into it. I mean, I feel like we've got some interesting things that the algorithm has selected here.
Song 1.
And I always love it when randomly we sort of go in order. So this starts somewhat, in that chronological sense. We're going back to 2003. It is from an album called 8 Million Stories by a group, Soul Position, yourself and RJD2. And the song is called The Jerry Springer Episode.
Like Mary J, eyes like Lauryn Hill, body like Big Les, backyard and thick legs. But the only time we got along was in the bed. She had an attitude of monumental magnitude. Couldn't take her anywhere without the broad acting rude. Even with your family, she had no gratitude. I took her to my mom's crib, she started snapping on the food. Goes without saying that my mom's wasn't feeling it. Wild out, tried to hit shorty with a skillet. I held mom's back, told old girl to leave, but mom's already had a handful of weave. Shorty crouched down so she could bob and weave.
Is this a fictional song or is this based on actual events?
It's fictional, you know what I'm saying? But it's more like I always pull from little funny ass scenarios that I see around me in my life. And I think when I wrote this, I probably was watching Jerry Springer every day. I had a period in my life where I would literally watch Jerry Springer, then I watched like Judge Mathis. Then I had periods before then when I was watching like Eliminate and just dating shows. I had a real heavy TV period when I was writing this album. And so the Jerry Springer shit and all the reality shows was just like always in the front of my mind. It's just like, this is the most bugged out, kind of sad but entertaining thing on television. But I can't stop watching it. And, when it, at that time, I felt almost like, and me and RJ felt this similarly, like underground rap was too serious. Like if you go back to 2001, 2002, there really was no humor in underground rap at all. And so we kind of felt like, yeah, we can rap and our beats are dope. But when we and RJ got together, we would laugh and bug out. And you know how it is. Like I've been to your house and we've done funny skits. Me and RJ have always kind of been like that, laughing and stuff like that. So the Jerry Springer episode was just like, yo, I'm going to do some bugged out funny shit. Just make it about a girl that, that you need to get rid of, but you can't because you just don't know how to act. And everybody's dated somebody like that. You're like, man, I really should get rid of this chick. But, like, she is fine, though. Like, look at that ass, or whatever you say. And then you end up, like, putting up with all kind of stuff you shouldn't put up with. So, and the beat just sounds bugged out and funny, Like you can't write a serious song to that. And so I was always drawn to those kind of songs, those kind of beats. RJ would give me those beats and he would never say nothing. He wouldn't know what beat I was going to choose. He might have gave me 30 beats on that beat tape or back then. And I probably would have been like, okay, I wrote a whole song to 30 seconds of what ended up being Jerry Springer. It was never like a full song laid out. And half the beats I chose were like, he would do beat CDs where he might have a beat that's like 3 minutes. But then he'd have a little outro joint that was just like 30 seconds, Pete Rock, Large Pro style. I would pick the outro joint. And a lot of the album, 8 Million Stories, was that. And Jerry Springer episode was like that. I was like, this is a bugged out rap beat. It kind of fits where we are, just trying to do some lighthearted stuff because we knew the album was going to be serious anyway. So we always wanted to have a balance with Soul Position. So that was kind of like the motivation for it.
You're a producer in your own right, and then you form a group with a really talented producer as well, RJD2. With him in the producer, seat and you in the MC seat, what did you learn from him making that Soul Position record?
I learned a lot. I mean, truly, I never learned how to write solo songs until Soul Position. I never had any interest in really being a solo artist until that collaboration. So the songwriting process, I kind of learned that as a soloist from doing Soul Position. And then I think maybe the biggest lesson it taught me is just how to give someone their space, right? Like, because I do beats, sometimes there's a natural need for me to say, oh, you should take it there, or you should do this with it, RJ, or what about, okay, I was thinking you should add some this at that part. I don't do that with Soul Position. With Soul Position, it's kind of like, he'll give me whatever he gives me. I'll pick what I want. If I've got the BPM, I might arrange it, a little bit, verse, chorus. I'll send it back to him and let him go to town until he's done. And when he's ready to let me hear it, then I will go. But I try to give him his space because I realized because I make beats that I would want the same space. So I don't want to become one of these annoying rappers telling a producer what to do just because I rap. You know what I mean?
Yo, change the snare here.
We actually had an argument over the snare on 8 Million Stories.
No, tell me, what is this?
I remember we had a real debate over one snare over there because I was like, yo, the snare this ain't the one. I was like, you got mad snares in there. Can we just try something else? And I remember him getting kind of tight, like, nah, this is a snare. And I was like, all right, you got it, Chief. I do think he went and doubled back and changed that snare on his own, though.
This is the moment that we clip out. And it's like, in your face, RJ.
Right.
You guys are also 20 years younger than you are now than at the time. So, the notes and the creative process part of the, process might have been still a new territory for talented young men working together.
Exactly. And I think that's all it was because, RJ's got his own thing, his own style. And I don't want to be so bent on my vision of the production that I kind of cut off his gift and what he brings to the unit that's so unique. There's something there that people hear when they hear my voice over his production that I can't do on my own. And if I start standing in his way and telling him how to do his thing, his voice gets muted a little bit.
Sure. Finally, I'd be remiss if I don't ask the annual question of what's up with that Soul Position album? Is there another one? What's up with that?
Hey, it's coming. It's coming. I don't. It exists.
God, that's a brutal answer.
It's coming, and it does exist. It's one of those things where it's like, there's been so many weird things that have happened when we start trying to get the ball rolling on that thing, and we had some talks this last year and trying to get it scheduled, and it's like, I do think it's gonna come out within the next year. I believe that because I believe that the things that had to be figured out have been figured out, and now it's more a matter of, okay, now that we know we both want this to come out in this kind of way, now let's just go back to what we were talking about in terms of a plan and getting on the same accord and setting a date and rolling with it. But the good thing is, like, the record's done. You know what I mean? Like, it's not like we're sitting here, should we do a new Soul Position record?
Right.
The music being there already changes the whole discussion for us. And at least that kind of gets us into, the more productive part, which is how can we maximize this? Because, the longer you go without putting out a record, you can't really half step. You're like, man, I really need our people to hear this record. And so we have to really be on one page with how we're going to market it, what we're going to do to get the word out and prioritize it on each of our ends.
An acceptable and enticing answer. And then, again, that was the 2020, installment of Where's the Soul Position album.
Song 2.
This is not technically your song, but it's really your song. And this is another one that I'm sure you've gotten asked about in the past. It is from 2002. It is on a rapper named Aesop Rock's album Daylight, and the song is called Alchemy.
I spit with an immense amount of power. Spark slang showers. Cowards cower underneath our storm clouds that indicate the acid rain hours. Now or never, ever. Ending on a bad note. Gripping a crab's throat for spitting a bad quote. Blueprint, what's your approach? I smash black folk and white folk alike for jokes with mics. And make a Kodak moment out of the most boring open mic. I'll make a sad fan.
You know what I mean? No disrespect to Aesop Rock, but you know what I mean when I say that it's kind of a Blueprint song with like Aesop Rock as well on the song.
Yeah, I came out blasting on that one. I came out just firing.
The splash.
Yeah, that was a special song, man. That song, what I remember the most about that time was like, that was like our first trip to New York City. Or it might have been our second, but I remember, after ASAP put out his was it Appleseed album, me and Cryptic from Adams Fam and all them were already cool. We had met on like a bunch of forums. I don't know if you remember ATAC.com. You sell tapes and stuff, and Hip Hop Infinity and all these little websites with forums. And so we would go on these forums, and somehow me and Cryptic kind of got cool. And so me and all the Greenhouse, we drove out to New York and kicked it with them for, I think it was right around Christmas or so, after our tapes had came out. And we stayed in Long Island. They all slept on Cryptic's, floor of his apartment, his bedroom in his parents' house at that time. And it was like 7 dudes in there for like, 3 or 4 days just making music. We re-released our music that spring, and they came out to perform, all the Addams Family and, what would end up being Cannibal Ox and Hangar 18, all those guys. And they brought Aesop Rock with them. And we had met him at that point, but I think him and Logic had like a thing where they're like, yo, I like your shit, because they were kind of in the same weird space then, We got cool, and then we're like, okay, the next time we come out, we're going to come out for Rocksteady, and we're going to do this shit all over again. So this is all within like a year or two. So we were all fans, and we started exchanging tapes. So when I would see the Addams Fam or Crip, he would give me a tape with a bunch of their stuff. I'd give him a tape with a bunch of my stuff. And this was also like Rhymesayers, because we were cool with Slug and Idea then too. And so when they would come to Columbus, we would have tapes. So we would have these tapes that were kind of circulating with demos of songs. And collaborations and it would be like soul position songs on it that hadn't no one heard. And I was hearing like Cannibal Ox songs in like 2000, like Metal Gears and all this. It was just like blowing my mind. And we're like, yo, this is crazy. But we were all just like family, just like super cool immediately. The next time we were out there, Logic, he was like, yo, I'm going to do some stuff with a Logic too. And I was like, he's like, man, you should do some. I'm like, cool, let me pick a beat. And so I played him the beat over the phone before we got out there. And like, this is the beat, I wanted to make something mean and slow. And he loved it. And I was like, okay, well, I'm gonna come out and bring my MPC with me and let's do this shit together. And when we were out there, I think we were at Cryptic One's house. Cryptic engineered it, recorded it, and he mixed it. And so, I wrote and I was like, all right, I'm just gonna come out the gate like I do on all of my stuff. And it was just, I just caught lightning in a bottle. Sometimes you just got it, and it was one of those days. It was like, okay, I'm just in my bag with this verse, and it just worked. And then he and I wrote the parts where we were going back and forth, and then the chorus came together. And it's just like a classic collaboration. And we didn't know at that time, this was, I think this was right before he signed to Def Jux or right around the same time. And so it was like, we were just doing music. We didn't know what the home was going to be for this music. We didn't know at the time that RJ was going to get signed to, Def Jux didn't exist. And then as we started doing our stuff, then they popped up and they existed. We're like, oh shit, y'all are cool with LP? Because, everybody loved Cold Flow back then. I couldn't believe that they knew LP. Like, how y'all know LP? This is incredible. And then we were out there just going to Rocksteady and Cryptic. And so we were kind of introduced into that whole underground scene, Stronghold, those cats, we all to this day, Weightless and Stronghold is all cool, lifelong, and Poison Pen, that's still family to this day. It's all from started back then, 99, 2000, when all those crews were just running around and the Scribble Jam. And but that Alchemy collab was like, and I had joints like that all over the place within the crew, but I didn't have anything that was popping like that. And when that song came out, everybody was like, who is this guy?
Was there ever a question as to whether it might not even end up on Aesop's project? Was there ever a point where you were like, maybe this is something that I want to use on a Blueprint project?
Nah, I never thought about that. Because back then we were doing so much music that we never even considered like, oh, well, I'm going to take that one. It was like, if he wanted it for his shit, he's like, yo, let me get that. It was his, in the same way where like, he did like 2 or 3 songs with a Logic, and one came out on Logic's, one came out on his, and one was like a B-side years later. And we were just sitting around doing music. We like the day we did Alchemy, we probably recorded 8 or 10 songs. You know what I'm saying?
So it wasn't like this moment where you were like, oh my God, like this is the one, because you guys were just like barring out on everything that you guys were doing.
Exactly. Everybody who was there when we recorded it was like, damn, that's fire. But we were doing all that stuff. I never thought that it was going to be that. I never thought that the timing would come out to where he was taking off as Def Jux was taking off to give him the platform. And this thing would be on this record that just like basically was kind of, I don't say hand-picked, but it was pretty much a record that was like made for our audience, or what would become our audience. And I didn't know that because it was all forming around us. So we didn't really know, like, underground hip hop was technically kind of new. Like, we didn't even really have a lane until all these things kind of came together. And then it became a lane.
I guess what I always think about is, did it not feel as official as it might look in hindsight now to you or to people from the outside? Because even the underground at that point in the late 90s was still like Talib Kweli or people who were signed to like more established things. Did it sort of just feel like, to translate it into like a comedy like zone, like did it feel like you guys were just doing like amateur open mic night like type stuff, and like all of a sudden it's like, oh, this stuff that we made that we know is dope all of a sudden is on a bigger platform? Like, we actually fucked around and we made something here.
Yeah.
And it didn't feel like we were building a movement at the time.
Yeah, definitely. It definitely felt like that because, if you look back at that landscape, it was raucous, because it was kind of that kind of stuff. Like, none of us could get played on Stretch and Bobbito. None of us would get played on, the Wake Up Show. They didn't mess with none of the kind of stuff that we were doing. We weren't making the kind of underground shit that the biggest underground outlets were messing with. So we didn't even technically have a lane until we all got together. And then all of a sudden, Sadiq and Slug were like, hey, wait a minute, we got something here. And then, LP and Amit were like, wait a minute, we got something here. And then they basically started picking up groups from our whole circle. You know what I'm saying? Like Weightless, Addams Family, we were kind of like the farm teams for what would soon become Def Jux and Rhymesayers. They were seeing what we're doing. Okay, this soul position thing, this is the RJ. Oh man, what's up with that? Let us get that. Bing, they just pluck it out. Oh, this RJD2 thing. Oh yeah, we got that over here, Def. Come on, fuck with us. And so, this Canox thing is with Adams, like Adams, Weightless, and we were the farm team. And I don't necessarily even think those, like, they were just looking at, like, look at these dudes doing all this damn music. It's different than everything else. And then all of a sudden, Rhymesayers and Weightless starts becoming this thing, and this underground shit that we're doing starts to pop. And the next thing you know, Atmosphere gets the Fat Beats deal. And that was a real big thing that people forget about, because prior to Atmosphere getting the deal and Rhymesayers getting the deal with Fat Beats to put out their vinyl, none of those New York people would touch our shit.
You guys were like the underground to the underground. Like the underground was like, oh, that shit is too underground for us. Like,
yeah.
What is that?
Yeah. And we could rap. We did all the same shit everybody else. We were still battling. We were still on the scene. We were playing shows. We were doing everything, but our sound wasn't as conventional as everybody else's. So we kind of had to develop our own lane, and we didn't know none of that stuff was going to pop. Like when me and RJ did Soul Position, at that time, there was nothing like that. So we were just like, yo, we didn't think we would ever get a label that wanted to put our records out. We couldn't find none of that shit. Like even in Columbus, there were people who looked at us in Columbus like, yeah, y'all are cool. But you know what I'm saying? Like the megahertz is real underground because Bobito fucks with them and they're on Fondulum. Y'all don't have those cosigns. So y'all don't count almost. And y'all are putting out your own stuff. And, even then it was still a weird thing about putting out your own records back then. People will kind of still look at you. You still want to be signed by whoever, you know what I'm saying?
It's just such a weird thing to consider all this stuff when the internet was still in its infancy as well. And like what a huge difference that makes, 15 years, 10 years later, just all of the practices and the gatekeepers and the way that shit operated that is now like, it's out of here. None of that stuff is a factor, or at least not in the same way.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. And back then it was something you had to really think about. Like, okay, how do you as an artist who's not from a major market, who has no affiliations, no cosigns from the biggest outlets, how do you build a career being from Columbus, Ohio, being from Minneapolis, Minnesota? How do you do that? And that's kind of how the touring thing went. We saw that, okay, maybe we'll never be welcome in New York like that. Maybe we'll never have those cosigns. But then we would go and we would get on the internet and we would see that people were rocking with us and people were buying the tapes. And then there became these little online boutiques that sold nothing but stuff like the shit we was doing. And then that gave us some, like, wait a minute. Then we start making money off of it. Like, wait a minute. We're making money. We're making enough money to pay a Logic $200 every, here's some record. That meant a lot. But it was something where we had to go a completely different route because we never could get those cosigns because we were just so different. And like a song like Alchemy, to this day, you will never catch somebody like Stretch and Bobito playing that. They probably don't even acknowledge it exists, even though it's a classic. They'll be like, oh yeah, whatever. We don't play no Aesop Rock or no, that's that weirdo shit. You know what I'm saying? But they're lost. You know what I'm saying? We still won,
It's so ridiculous too that like you could sort of give that mentality a pass at the time. Okay, sometimes you got to be an early adopter to hop on that stuff. But at this point, this is a damn near 20-year-old record. I've seen you perform this song in front of crowds, and the place erupts. Like there's an audience for this, guys. Stretch and Bob, if you're listening to this, you need to add some Alchemy or Aesop Rock featuring Blueprint to your playlist, to your mix shows, whatever that may be.
Yeah, I agree. And it's like, look, we've proved that this is a viable thing. Like, when can y'all just give it up? Can you please just give us our props? Just a little bit.
When would you say that you think whatever era that was, whatever you want to call that, the sort of bubbling and the rise of this movement and this counterculture, when do you end that chapter? What year do you feel like that particular chapter ended in your memory?
I think 06, 07 was when I saw things change.
And what do you attribute that to?
You know what? The funny thing is 06, 07, if I remember correctly, that's when we started getting backlash from the same press who loved us in 01, 02, 03. And a lot of it, they wanted to play like party music, the Diplo stuff, Dipset, like all that stuff. Then they became almost like, instead of just being like, okay, we moved, they was like dissing us. Like, nah, that shit isn't, we ashamed to have, said that shit was fire 5 years ago because now we listen to Dipset. and Cameron is the best rapper. You know what I'm saying? And, Diplo and anybody associated with him was where it's at. Now we're trying to dance. The mashup guys, who Girl Talk and all of that stuff, that's where all of the press went. And all the press went there. And thankfully, we were able to make it through that era because we had built the touring thing. The press pretty much tried to kill the movement, just like they tried to help build it between 06 and 08. And a lot of people didn't make it through that because they didn't have that grassroots thing with their fan bases that we had.
That's so interesting. I can't think of a lot of examples of a time when media builds something up, like media specifically. I could see it with fans. I could see it, with people, especially with people of a certain age, adolescents. You love something, and then all of a sudden, the shit that you love when you're 12 isn't as cool as when you're 16, and you almost feel like you have to disavow that. But for journalists and media to do that, it seems so wildly personal in a way that shouldn't really infiltrate the walls of media and press. Why do you think that was the case? I know you can't speak for them, but if you had to speculate, why do you think that they were coming for your necks?
What I realize is that it's kind of it's a part of their job, right? When you try to build your career on your ability, your reputation, on your ability to show people what's next, you somehow set yourself up for a tendency to tear down what was already next before in order to legitimize your viewpoint of this new shit that you're telling people they need to be up on. You know what I'm saying? So it's almost like this continual tearing down of the old thing in order to prop up the new thing. And I think we have a lot of that because there was also this identity thing that some of these writers were having too, where people knew that they were some corny motherfuckers. Some of them were legit dudes who we would see out at events and kick it. I remember kicking it with John Carmanica. Me and that dude had an epic night at Scribble Jam, just drinking and kicking and partying it. You know what I'm saying? So some of those guys are cool dudes in real life. Some of them are not. And because they're not, they're kind of insecure. And so when the street shit kind of started popping, and the club shit, they could be like, oh, I can be a writer and kind of prove that I'm cool enough to listen to club shit and street shit. Oh, man, sign me up. Fuck this nerd shit. Fuck this emo shit. And they kind of tried to get us out of the paint. I mean, I have friends here in Columbus, former friends, I'll say, who used to write about us and diss the shit out of us. And local, they made it a point to write about records that we didn't even send them to try to diss us in the weekly papers. Because after a while, I'm like, yo, man, if you don't fuck with this shit, it's cool. Don't listen to it. Leave us alone. Then you pick up the paper and you see them talking shit about you. And you're like, man, these dudes are just trying to get points.
We broke into a Logic's garage and we stole this off a thumb drive. Here's the album. It's not even out yet. And it's trash.
Right. That's how they were doing us for years. And now the funny part is now everything's cool again. Now they want to be cool again. Cause now they're because you remember for a while, you couldn't use backpack rap was a pejorative. Right. Underground rap was a pejorative. Are you making that underground shit? That wasn't tight. Now I hear rappers like Rock Marciano and you know what I'm saying? Talking about we're underground. You know what I'm saying? And West Side Gun. They're happy to be underground. They call themselves underground rappers. I'm like, this is amazing because 15 years ago they crucified us for being that. You know what I mean?
And the terms also just sort of seem a little less applicable too. It's like, what is underground if everybody gets on Spotify with the same distribution? Obviously, people with budgets and bigger labels, they're able to, market and get that out there. But there's certainly a line in the sand that, again, thanks to the internet and the sort of streaming distribution where, you can't hang your hat totally on oh, well, he's mainstream and he's underground, because it's all being consumed in similar ways.
Yeah, it's blurry. And, that's the thing I also have to acknowledge because, yeah, you're right. When we were coming up, underground wasn't just your placement in the market. It was identified with a certain sound that went against a certain sound. Now people say underground more in respect to their place in the market. Not necessarily, yeah, we make some grimy shit, but for us, it was like, nah, you can't be no underground dude making club records or making pop music in underground. There's no such thing as being, you know what I'm saying? Underground is this sound. That's how we felt coming up because we were making it, almost in rebellion to the other shit that we didn't want to be. And now you're right. When access is the same, when everybody has the same, yeah, you get on Spotify, we're all there. you got artists like West Side Gun getting signed to these, to the fucking Rock Nation. Where's the line now? You know what I'm saying?
Right. I would also think that the delineation between that sound probably eases up as well when you exit, like, your youthful years. We've seen it with your career, and really anybody, if you want to look at and pull from that era, everybody kind of started exploring other sounds. It's not like they felt so dogmatic about every song has to use this break beat, like this dusty break beat. And like, if you don't sample
right.
strictly off vinyl, then you're corny. It's like, everybody kind of loosened up a little bit, I think, too.
Song 3.
We're skipping ahead now, 2012. We just hopped a decade. We're going to the album Deleted Scenes, and the song is called The American Dream.
Ain't that the American dream? Let that top down.
Yeah.
Let that top down.
I used to dread going to class back in freshman year. I was a popular kid, but had some terrible gear. My peeps was broke, no cream for clothes, so you know what that means in school. Jokes. Right, I think I was 13 or 14 when my parents had to have a little talk with me. They told me money don't grow on trees, and ever since then I've been on my P's, up and out the house into the.
So this was like the Outtakes sort of sister album to Adventures in Counterculture, right?
Yeah, this was a lot of stuff where every song on this record at one point was in the track listing and then kind of got moved out or shuffled out for whatever reason. This was something where it's just more about just like, I think we had talked about, like, you rarely hear anybody in our lane speak about wanting to have good things and the best things. It's like it comes with, if you're going to do this shit, it's like some unspoken rule that you got to just hate money. You know what I mean? You got to be sleeping on couches and be dirty all the time and just fuck that. I don't want no money from this shit, or I don't want this to be my job. And I always thought that was weird. Like, why don't somebody just say that this is the American dream, man? Like, I just want to be in a nice car. I just want to be taken care of for whatever it is I choose to do. I want to be successful. And like hearing other people say that, like, it's like, yo, it's okay for us to say that shit sometimes. It don't mean that we are like celebrating excess, but I do think that there's a part of this, like the American dream that hip hop epitomizes. Like sometimes we spend so much time vilifying it that we ignore the example that hip hop is set. You know what I mean?
I feel like it sort of ties into what we were talking about before. It's almost a reactionary response or a reflexive response to, well, this music that's very commercial and glorifies capitalism and the having of things seems like diametrically opposed to what we're doing. So therefore, our sound is different, and we reject the spoils of war that
right.
you are. We don't want money. You will reward us with DAP. That is all we will take.
Yeah. And then you're homeless, and then you're mad and don't rap anymore.
And you literally can't rap anymore. So you can't afford a booth anymore.
Right. Right. No studio time for you because you hate money.
Well, in addition to sort of giving a megaphone to what seems like a controversial idea in the underground, this era was also you sort of shedding your skin that you had previously in your career, experimenting with less samples, more live instrumentation. And at the time, it was sort of a big, I would say maybe even a little scary move for you, right?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, I got cussed out over that shit. I remember we went on that European tour, this Rhymesayers European tour after Adventures in Counterculture came out. Man, it was some people there who were so mad at me for that record. Like, I remember a dude, I'm standing next to Greaves at the merch table, and he was just livid that I sang on the record. He was just so fucking mad, and he was just trying to let me have it. And I was just like, well, do you hate Greaves too? And he was like, no, Greaves is fine. I was like, well, he gets to sing. Why don't I get to sing? You know what I mean? I can sing just as good as this fool. But I realized then that, yeah, when I was doing it, I didn't give a fuck. I didn't understand what I know now about branding, and that branding happens in the minds of the people, and that things that you do for 4, 5, 6, 7 years straight, people identify that with you. And that when you go against that, you create conflict in their mind. You can be doing it great. It doesn't matter. Like you're creating conflict simply because you're doing it under the same name, but you're doing something completely different. And when I was doing that record, which I think is a crazy record, and it's a crazy time because I look back at some of that stuff like, wow, I can't believe I made this. And I'm still impressed with it, but it reminds me of just like the hill that I was climbing to kind of get the people to understand that I was more than just a guy who made 1988, you know what I mean? Or the guy who, rhymed with soul position. I need to prove that I'm an artist, and so that I can have the longevity in my career, because it wasn't just about that record with me. It was like, yo, how do you set yourself up to have another 10 years at this? And I looked at that going into that record, like, if I don't do this record a certain kind of way, some people are going to be bored with it. Some people are going to move on. This thing is moving. And this is what I want to do. Like, I'm sitting around making this stuff every day, and I believe in it. Although there was no lane until Kanye put out 808s and Heartbreaks. That record probably would not have seen the light of day, because they were finally like, wait, there's somebody kind of like what you're doing. It's not what you're doing, but it was that big of a void when I started that record, that his record coming out probably ensured that record came out.
But despite you saying, that about sort of relating to, in hindsight, the guy at the merch table, castigating you over that, it feels like that it was ultimately a good move for your brand, right?
Definitely, because I think prior to that, I was just seen as a rapper. That record, the recording side of it, and then the live show side of it, I think helped take me into the next chapter, which is, okay, I seen him on stage and he's playing a guitar, he's playing keys. Okay, he's got effects now. He's got, a bass player. Okay, and a DJ. So it was this different experience that people had never had. And it's like, okay, now, he's on stage with a trombone. These are things I couldn't have done off of the 1988 record. I've been given the ability to take chances now and do different things now because I took that chance back then.
In hindsight, do you think there's anything you would have done differently in terms of trying to, would it have been possible for you to ease your demographic into this change? Or do you think that the sort of swift, sharp turn was necessary? There's no way around that.
It probably could have been done better, probably, but it would have taken more setup. It would have taken more years of just really being contrived and just okay, let me just make sure that this has this element, you know what I mean? Or let me just snatch the snare from Impeach the President, and put that in radio and active so it will feel a little bit more hip hop, But I was just like, fuck that. I'm going to do what I feel. If this shit works, it's going to work. And if they don't like it, they can kiss my ass. If this is my last shot, this is it. That's how I looked at it. I did that record like this could be my last record in this situation. And with any fan base, because you understand, the underground shit was dying right before my eyes. As I'm making that record, that's the same period where people are killing underground rap, and are people I know who are doing it or going back to work. I'm like, man, people are struggling out here. This is not what it used to be.
You recorded enough material to warrant 2 albums. You had The Adventures in Counterculture, and then sort of the sister record, Deleted Scenes. How long was the gestation process for this? And then what was that process even like for you deciding what was going to make this record? You had a lot of material.
Yeah. And, there's probably another 2 CDs worth of stuff that didn't even make it to there. But, that was the first time in my life where I'll say I truly made demos, as opposed to if I'm just making a rap song, on some boom bap shit. I hear the beat. The beat is pretty much fleshed out. It'll go through some changes, but it's not going to change radically. I'll write the song, record it. If it's dope, it's a keeper. This record was completely different. It was like I had to go back to just writing melodies and riffs. So I would wake up every day, and my goal every day was to write 3 good riffs. I would sit down in front of the piano. You know how it is. You play. So it's like you sit down, you go through 10 ideas, sometimes 15, 20. And those 3 you save will be like, okay, I'm on to something with these. Then you come back and okay, can I come with a little bridge or some variations? And I would do all this stuff on the piano, and I'm not the best piano player, so it would probably take me longer than take other people. And then this was before I was using Ableton as well, so it probably would have been slower then. And so that whole part was way before I wrote a single word. It was just working on music, and I had never done music in that way before. I would just, because I was a sample guy. But this was where I learned how to write music through that process. So it took me a minute. It took me from, 2005 to 2010. And it probably wasn't until late 2010, maybe 6 months before the first single came out, to where I knew the exact track listing. And I had to listen to it and then take breaks, because it was like obsessive almost. I'm sitting there with all these songs that are all completely different from each other. And I'm trying to put together an album where everything is different, but it fits.
You're kind of too close to it at some points. You kind of have to take a step back so you can actually see the mural that you're painting.
Yeah. And some of it didn't come together. But when it was done, I knew. When it was done, it was like, this goes into that, this goes into that, this goes into that. And it was one of those things where it was like, and I talked about in the book where I me and Sadiq would go back and forth about whatever set of songs I was working on. And I'd have different iterations of the album. And then, for years, he was like, okay, so what do you think? You think you done? I'd be like, nah, not yet. And I just disappear and do more. And then 6 months later, hey man, what do you think? I don't know what you think. So, yeah, I like this, and this. What do you think? You think you done? Nope. I'm gonna keep going. And I would just keep going. And people thought I was like shelved. And I remember some other artists at the time was like, Print, they putting out this artist and that artist, and they won't even put out your album. And I was like, whoa, I'm not even done. Like I'm not out because I'm trying to get somewhere. And it wasn't just writing a dope rap song. I was trying to get somewhere musically at that time. And it took me 4 years to make that record. But what I learned in that 4 years about music, I apply still to this day. And part of it is that discernment. It's like how to poke holes in your own music to where you don't need nobody to tell you what's missing. I'm at that point now. Like if I give somebody a song, I already know 2 or 3 things that I could improve upon it with it. I'm just waiting for them to confirm it. I don't need them to tell me, oh, Print, this is how you make it better. No, I just need you to remind me that I'm being honest with myself.
Something I've always noticed too about your music is that it seems like at a certain point, I want to say around like the Adventures in Counterculture album, to me, to my ears, there's almost a discernible style in, you started playing with a new sort of vocal tone on that, where it was a little bit more deeper and like a bit more serious. Like,
Yes.
Obviously it's not a complete one-to-one scenario where it's before and after and you never blended those styles, but was that something that you did sort of intentionally or what was the spark behind that? I'm always interested in MCs who change their voice up slightly, Yeah,
it absolutely was. It was intentional. Like sometimes you have these periods, and the thing that allowed me to kind of develop it was like, it's funny what I think kind of did it. And this is some random trivia here. Is like, I think that period I started actually sitting down when I recorded. That was one change. Another change in the counterculture era was like, I was recording those songs. None of those songs were recorded with drums. So every song on Adventures in Counterculture was just me recording it to the piano version of it. So if you look at like The Clouds or Radioactive, the piano part, that's the intro, that was basically the beat that I wrote the song to and recorded the demo to. And so because it was so sparse and had no drums, I couldn't just go crazy. But then, when you do that, you start listening back, like, yo, this sounds kind of fresh. I sound like Guru on this, mostly the voice, and I start thinking like, yo, and I always thought he sounded bugged out. And I was like, yo, I can kind of get that style just by sitting and just not even waiting until this beat is fully produced to record my vocals. Just record over it right now. And then the pocket sounds different. And then but once I started seeing how it sounded, especially with the mood of certain songs, I decided to kind of keep it that way and not re-record, more animated.
Why were you recording to drumless versions of the songs at that time? Was there a reason?
Because it was the first time I was composing. So as I was typically you write, you're sampling, then you're pretty much hook up the sample, add the drums, you're done. For me, I was basically writing back then was more like, okay, I'm going to write a riff. And if I like the riff and if it inspires me emotionally, I'm going to just write right now instead of trying to fully produce this song right now and then maybe write myself into a corner or feel like I didn't get nothing done today. I was like, if this makes me feel any way emotionally, the melody, then I know that it'll translate when it's fully produced. So I would write right then and there to just the piano or just the guitar, or whatever it was, and there were no drums. And that's and then I went back and produced as I found songs that sounded good.
Oh, okay, that's interesting. And then what was the impetus behind recording sitting down? Well, these are the questions that we get into on this show. Like, I'm going all in the weeds here.
Digging real deep.
Digging deep. So, yeah, what was that?
I think it was more just like, you know how it is when you're recording yourself and sometimes you got to get back to the control thing at the same time. You're like, okay, I got to hit record, run over here, do this take. And after a while, I was like, I'm tired of running across the room to record these vocals. So I'm just moving the mic right here next to the machine. I'm going to hit record, and then I'm going to turn this way and I'm going to record, and I'm going to turn back. And that's kind of how it was, just strictly convenience, because I didn't want to run across the room no more.
Song 4.
A few years later, we're in 2015 now from the King No Crown album, and the song is called Great Ideas Never Die.
They say that dying young is only for the unlucky, but I envy all the ones that get to leave early. Life's a trip, you better have your bags ready. You never want to be the last one to lead a party. I thought that we would go first and you would tell our story. Maybe make a movie about the Rhymesayers rise to glory. The classic albums, the fanfare, the world tours. So it's kinda weird, I'm here now telling yours. I've been losing people my whole adult life. Never been one to exploit my pain in a song.
Yeah, that song, I mean, obviously, that song is about, Idea, a friend, and, label mate. And, it was one of those songs where I was trying. I remember there were other songs that were out about him before mine. And at the time, it was like there were a couple people who wrote verses and stuff, about him, and they had never met him.
Right. He died in 2010. So this song comes out like 5 years later. His death.
Yeah. And I probably recorded it in 2014, 2013, or whatever. But I remember seeing those people and I was like, some of them I was just like, that's not how I would do it. But then I realized like, they never met him. They didn't know him at the stages you knew him. You know what I'm saying? So they're not wrong for that. But if you feel that way, then it's your job as his friend, you know what I'm saying, and colleague, to go out there and do it, write the song that you think needs to be written. And it wasn't easy. And I probably cried while I wrote it, you know what I'm saying, or by the end of it when I sat down and listened to it. But I had to do it because, sometimes it's kind of like going to someone's funeral. If you don't go to someone's funeral, it's hard to get closure. And funerals are sad events. No one really wants to go to a funeral. But you go to pay respect and so that you can get closure. And so that song to me was like, this is how you get closure on your friend's passing. You have to write this thing and make sure he's sent off properly so that when people look for him or want to remember him, they have this thing that makes them feel and understand, and it reminds them how special he was,
I really like how you say in the first line, they say that like, it's tragic for somebody to die young, but it's even harder for the people who are left.
Yeah. And that's something that people don't really talk about that. Like, it's like we spend all this time like, oh man, they died young. Oh man, I'm sad. Like, yo, man, we still stuck here though. You know what I mean? like dying is probably easier than living. You typically don't get a choice about dying. It happens like that. Living, you wake up every day, and if you're not happy with your life, and if you have pain and stuff that you got to work through, or situations that ain't optimal, life can be hard, man. Like, especially if you're dealing with losing people, And so I never looked at it like sticking around really long is means automatically that this means more, or like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I'm the lucky one, because not necessarily, man. Some people are not meant to be around longer. He's a guy, he did so much in a short amount of time. It's like, he really didn't have, what else did he have to really prove? You've been killing this since you was 16, 17. It was something, it took me a minute to write it, one line at a time, a line here, a line there. But there was certain things that I felt I needed to say that other people didn't say.
Song 5.
We're going back now, 2005 from the 1988 album, and the song is called Fresh.
Yeah, you know how we do. Yeah. Uh-huh. You know what time it is. Fresh. My name is Blueprint. You know how we do. Fresh. It's that time again. Yeah. I'm the man the whole underground is talking about. Cats stealing my style before I even had an album out. 2 years ago, the same cats was doubting me. Heard me on Alchemy, now they sound like me. A bunch of powder puffs rhyming with aggression. Forgot to follow the steps, the natural progression. I almost think you sat in on my sessions. You came to class on time, but you didn't study my lessons. You only got a piece of the genuine article. If I call you son, it's because I followed you. Thank me on your liner notes for making it possible. Every year I change
I feel
it
like
up and
you
make it
had
harder
something
for
to
you.
prove on the 1988 album.
Yeah, I did. You know, it's funny. Like, I remember doing the first song on the 1988 album, and what's funny, it wasn't even for that. It was like me and DJ Prism. We had this thing. We would call certain shit the 88 style. He would tour with us, and like I remember, I had a verse I did on one of Prism's records. It never came out, and it got lost or something. And I was like, "Yo, how you just gonna lose my verse?" You know. And so I took that verse. That verse ended up being the first verse on a 1988 record. Printmatic, you know the name, Behind the Curtain. That was something I did for a Prism record because his records was so raw and grimy. I had to rhyme like that to keep up with him and all of his dudes. So I was like, I gotta get real gutter if I'm rhyming with y'all and some shit. And so he heard it and he was like, "Yo, that's that 88 shit right there." And I was like, "You right, that's that 88 shit. I'm about to do the whole record." And that was kind of the onus for it. But yeah, that whole record, I felt kind of like it was time for me to kind of prove what I could do. Because, you know, if you really look at everything prior to that, I had already done 2 Soul Position records, maybe 2 or 3 Greenhouse records. I had produced 3 Logic records. And so as a producer, I was final. And then the Soul Position records gave me the confidence as a solo artist to be like, you know what? You can make a record now. Because remember, prior to that, I didn't really want to make another record. I was going to probably, I really wanted to retire after 8 Million Stories. Because I remember I wrote Share This and I was like, "You're never going to top this song. Stop rapping."
Wow. Why did you think that? Like, what do you attribute that to?
I just remember hearing the song and being like, "Yo, you're never going to write this shit again. This is fucking special as fuck. You can't do that every time you step up to the mic. You might as well just stop because you're going to let people down and you're going to be fucking whack because you can't do that now."
I can't tell if that's the highest compliment that you're giving yourself or the highest insult or the lowest
It's
insult,
both.
you know?
It's both. It's like,
So
yeah,
you did something so amazing.
Yeah. Every blue moon, you're actually really good. And then you suck the other time. But, you know, you don't want the part where you're really good to be known for that because then you look like you'll suck more often. You know? So, but no, that song, it took me a while before I even wanted to start a record. And I think I had to kind of take the approach I did because otherwise I'd have been trying to make songs that were like on some Soul Position shit. And then through dealing with Prism and just his aesthetic and just what we were into as producers, then we were just like, "Yo, how come nobody's tapping into this 88 shit?" We would have whole conversations about like that style of production and no one was doing it. And I was like, okay, I'm going to see if I can pull this off. And so Fresh was like an example of that. But you know, the funny thing, and I don't even know if I've ever told this story before, the beatbox sample on Fresh, there was a music sampler that Twix put out, right? With
Twix?
the candy bar, if I remember correctly. They did like a sampler with Bad Boy Records, right? And it was on CD. And you know who was hosting it? Dougie Fresh.
Get the fuck out of here.
Yep. And so I had this sampler and it was like, it started out with him like, "Yo, this is your host, Dougie Fresh. This Twix and Bad Boy." And I was like, I took that shit and chopped it all the fuck up and turned it into Fresh.
Listen, I'm saying it right now. This factoid is going into an episode of the hip hop game show, The Questions that we do. That is incredible. That is incredible. I love shit like that.
But yeah, that record, I really wanted to kind of take it back to basics because, you know, you also, as we talked about, some people viewed us, our whole crew, as being like, because we were underground and we were more, I guess, quote unquote, underground or just out there than the conventional stuff. A lot of people didn't think we could make records like that. They didn't know that we were heads and we could do that shit. So part of me was like, "Yo, I'm going to show you fools that this artsy emo shit is just what y'all are calling us, but that we can do anything. We listen to the same records. We're heads just like y'all. And I can make this thing that's just as dope as all that conventional shit that y'all make."
Yeah, it's funny. I never thought about it as sort of a reaction or a rebuke of the like artsy, you know, like weird underground, like, because it is very much, it's cut from that 88 cloth where it's just like hard raps, hard beats, the beatbox samples, the scratching, and done completely. I mean, if I'm not mistaken, you did all the production on that album.
Yeah, I did all the production on it. Yep.
Did that feel like a real progression for you? Or did it feel like a regression because you're sort of going back and capturing?
I won't say regression. I'll say it was like, it was paying homage to something that I never really understood. Before I made that record, I literally bought a bunch of albums from 1988 on tape, and they would just stay in my car for months and months. I remember a whole winter, I had like 3 or 4 tapes, and I'm just internalizing the sound and from refamiliarizing myself with some of these songs and these breaks. I'm just like, yo, I never knew who this break was. And then that's where kind of Rare Groove came in, because Rare Groove lived like a mile away from me in Cincinnati at the time. And so I would be listening to these old songs like, yo, Groove, what's the break on that such and such used on this thing? And he'd be like, oh, that's the blah, blah, blah break. And the next time I saw him, he would give me like 2 copies of it, you know what I'm saying, of the original. And I'd be like, holy shit, thank you, Groove. You know, and so he was kind of like my librarian. You know what I'm saying? Like when you're doing a research paper and you go to the library and you're like, yo, I'm doing it on this. What's the best books on this? And so Groove could give me all the records that I could just name. Well, what's that? You know, that, oh, that's the UFO break from the blah, blah, blah. Oh yeah, Steezo used it. Yeah, from the Steezo, that's UFO. Boom, 2 copies. A lot of that record was stuff like that, where it was like, I knew what I wanted to do, but my record collection, I ain't been collecting records as long as he has. So I needed to have somebody like that so I could kind of take these ideas that I had and then kind of take them and put that aesthetic on it, but also have the originals. So like the Tramp break, I never owned the Tramp break, the Otis Redding joint. I never had that. I knew it was the Tramp break because Salt and Pepper used it. I was like, yo, the Salt and Pepper Tramp break. You know what I'm saying? Let me get that. And he'd be like, all right, here it goes. Otis Redding, here you go. Give me a clean copy that was clean enough to sample. Then I go and do my work. You know what I mean?
Shout out to Rare Groove, the historian. It's so funny when you bring him up, and all I can think of is the countless times that you guys stayed at the crib in Orlando. Yeah. And I remember I'd be like driving home from work, or I'd be driving somewhere and just seeing him walking like miles from the house, walking back to the house because he had like heard about a record store or something that was like 3 miles away in the Florida heat. I just would pull over like, yo, you want to ride back? He's like, yeah, thanks.
Yeah, that's Groove. He explored everywhere. That's his thing. He and I just had a thing where I would know that by the time I woke up at 9, he would have walked like 3 miles, 4 miles around, had a breakfast sandwich, found a place to dig and come back.
That's what I was tripping on that, because you guys, you when you were on tour, you were staying at a house I was living in. You guys stayed at my house, and I remember finding that kind of weird that I'd wake up and I'd be like, yo, like Print, like, where's your DJ? Like, where's he at? And you'd be like, oh, he's like doing, you sort of just gave me this like smile, this like very knowing, like, oh, Groove is on his path, you know? And he would just be doing excursions in a city that he like doesn't know anything about. And he'd come back sweating with like records under his arms.
Yeah, that's Groove. He's a record, you know what I'm saying? He's a true, like a digging guy, like a guy who knows records. Like some people know records a little. Groove is one of those guys who really knows records. Like I'm a loop digger, right? Like I find loops. I'm into samples. I don't know the history of the labels. I don't know all the musicians. I don't know like the breaks by name. I just know like, yo, he used it on, you know, what's the Push It Along break? What's the drill strum? You know, he knows those. If you were to name the song that used it, he'd be like, oh yeah, that's the blah, blah, blah here.
Song 6.
We're going back to 2004. This is maybe something that I feel like you get asked about a little bit less, so I'm interested in hearing about it. This is from the Chamber Music album, and it is a song called Arms Too Short. Blueprint, the instrumental hip hop album maker. You got 2 under your belt, I want to say.
1, 2. Yeah, I got Chamber Music and Sign Language. Yeah, that record. I was working on that record when I met RJ. That's how he and I first hung out, because our original DJ in Weightless was a guy named DJ True Skills from Columbus. And he would go and play shows with us, greenhouse shows with us. And then I would be playing chamber music. This was in like the year 2000, 99. And he would be like, this shit is bugged the fuck out. You need to meet RJ. And I was like, who's RJ? He was like, oh, he's moving back from Cali. He just moved back from the Bay. But he makes bugged out instrumental shit like that. Next time you hear, I'm going to take you to his house. And that's how me and RJ met. RJ played me what ended up being Dead Ringer, and I played him that chamber music record.
Wow. You were easily just as much developing and grooming yourself to become a producer as you were an MC at the time. Really, probably more a producer in that era, right?
Definitely. I never saw myself as a solo artist because I was producing all the Weightless records, and that was my original just love. I rhymed with Greenhouse because, we were a crew and we just loved doing it. But I never saw my path as a solo artist or as an MC like I did with production. Production was, that was my thing. And so that record, it was real dark and just mean, but a lot of that came from I was heavily influenced by some of the original, what I call the original instrumentalists, which is like DJ Crush, DJ Shadow, Prince Paul, UK instrumentalists in trip hop, because there was no scene for it here. This is like '01. But the funny thing is, instrumental stuff, hearing DJ Shadow records in like 96, 95, that was kind of what got me into DJing, which is what got me into making beats. And so that was always my first love, was to be able to get good enough at production to where I could be like Shadow or Crush and make those kind of dark, mean records. So like that song right there is like the epitome. And so like the vocal samples on it, that's the Prince Paul influence. You know what I'm saying? Because he was always just, just bugged out, but he had such wide range of the vocal thing. He would tell stories with vocal samples on instrumental songs. And so that song right there is just like a bugged out record. I was like, I don't know what this dude is talking about, but this just sounds crazy. I'm sampling it.
Did your journey and path in those two instrumental records that you put out, did that spill over, or sort of, did it give you any tools that you would then implement into your solo records or your more traditional rap records?
I would say maybe pacing. I think, for when you're making a rap record, your pacing is way different than if you don't have a vocalist on it. How you unroll a song, how you kind of introduce different elements, and that pacing element, I didn't really get that until I started doing that kind of music. I was like, okay, you can't show your whole hand at the beginning of the track.
Because hip hop is all about, typically beat-wise, it's about finding the illest part of a song, and you lead with that. Not only do you lead with that, but for all of the classic shit, you repeat that part for 3 minutes. And yeah, you're right. Yeah. It's a completely different pacing and journey when you're not framing it around a traditional vocal-based song or a lyric-based song.
Exactly. And I think that's the biggest thing I learned from doing instrumental music, and just kind of like the letting an idea develop over time. So like when you make a rap song, I always kind of feel like, I need to just go ahead and figure out how this is going to go, get the elements in it, then arrange those elements. But when I was making instrumental music, like the chamber music, there's certain samples that I didn't find till the very end. I had a song I thought was done, and then I found this sample. Oh, I got to put this in there. This works for that. And that was before I had, I did that record with a EPS 16 plus. And so I didn't have like a lot of ways to throw in long samples. So I would kind of just needle drop records in and just play records throughout that thing, because I only had like 25 or 30 seconds of sampling time. So a lot of it was just me playing things on top of things and looping it and putting it together kind of like collage style.
I mean, that's got to feel so archaic now in a time where we use computers to do almost everything. Like, do you ever look back and just think like, how the hell did I make records like doing it?
Yeah, I look back like this was too difficult. It was too difficult, man. You know what's funny? I do look back at some of my records, but I look back at some of the older records. Like you ever go back and listen to like a Bomb Squad record, and you're just like, how were these guys able to put so many different samples together and make it sound like one source in a way that people can't even do right now? When I go back and listen to those records, what I hear is a a guy who had literally his whole record collection in his bedroom. And so I knew all my records. Like I had sticky tabs on every record. Every song that had something on it was noted. I couldn't do like, it was limited changing the pitch of certain things back then. But the walls of my room, my bedroom was all records. And I knew, like if I had 1,000, 1,500 records, I knew every fucking record. And that's what I think the Bomb Squad had that we don't have today. Now people just put shit on hard drives. Right. They don't know the records. Like when you know the records, like you spin them out, you know what a breakdown is, you just know it. Though it's easy to find those connections. Now I think they're finding one record, two record, that's it. And like you're saying, they're playing the main part over and over again. But that process was like, nah, if you know your records, you can really put together some crazy shit.
And find some shit that you might otherwise not have. You might have found the one dope part, and then, right now, it's the same with just listening habits. Any album, whether it was a CD or a tape that I got in a time before I had instant access to all music, even if I didn't like the record, I played the hell out of it. Not just A, to make sure that maybe there was something good, and B, it's like, damn, I just dropped $15 on this. I got to get my money's worth at least. It's like, I'm not gonna leave the movie like in the middle of the second scene because like it's not really clicking for me.
Yeah, it's true. I had that similar thought with Spotify the other day. I was like, Spotify has intensified the breadth of my music listening incredibly, but it's reduced the depth.
An understatement, if there ever was one, at least on my end. I'm just like, man, I've been trying to figure out if it's age, if it's just like the type of work and lifestyle that I live, or if it's smartphones that have sort of taken active listening out of my life as much as it used to be. Because I used to just listen to records and like, I don't vividly remember too much, but I'm pretty sure I used to just sit in my room and listen to records and not do anything else. And now I have trouble doing less than 3 things at once at any given moment. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. Yeah, it's very true. Last week I did something like that. I burnt a CD and put it in my car when my homie sent me a record. And man, I've been banging that record more than I played any record in the last 6 months. It's just an 8-song EP he sent me. I'm sitting here like, yo, this is fire. And I'm like, why am I listening to this so much? I'm like, oh, because it's on CD. And I kind of have to. So it's like, if I want to, now I think if I get a new record I want to actually listen to, I think I have to take it off Spotify.
Destroy the algorithm.
Yeah.
Song 7.
The last song that I have here is from 2014 Respect the Architect album, and it is a song called Overdosing.
Yeah. Right. Hot. Damn. It sounds so rugged. No glitz, no glam, just that low budget. It sounds so bug, my own fam don't want it. Print, there's no drums, man, I can't flow on it. No worries, my man, I'm about to go for it. Soon as you said no thanks, I had a song for it. I see fans sleeping, I see MC snoring. So 9 out of 10, I'm taking weird over boring.
Off kilter much?
Yeah, that was a weird one.
It's crazy. You're sort of, it's a very meta commentary on the song. You're talking about how the song was deemed too weird by your crew to rhyme on. But I got to say, you might have been a little ahead of the curve on the whole no drums movement because...
Yeah, it's true. Yeah. And they did take off shortly after.
Nobody's like drums are holding MCs back in 2020, 2021, like they're not there for that. But it's interesting to me too, because that song is on a record that was sort of, how did that song fit into the narrative of the album to you?
Well, you know what? I thought the song just was like, it was kind of like you're saying, it was meta in a sense where I'm like, yo, I'm just going to talk about this style. You know what I mean? Just blatantly so that you guys kind of know. And it was a beat where I was just like, I tried to give it to a Logic. I was like, yo, Logic, you need one of these. You don't have nothing like this. You way out there, bro. Come on back and do some conventional stuff every now and again. And he was like, dude, like, how am I supposed to rap to this? Like, there's no drums in it. I was like, you don't hear this shit? Like, we went back and forth, like, you tell me you don't hear this shit? This is you. And there ended up being there's 3 or 4 beats on that record that are like that. That record, the onus for that record was because I had these beats I kept telling other people. There was beats I tried to give the Abstract Rude on there. He was like, I don't know. I was like, yo, okay. Then I just took it and wrote like a Silver Lining. That was a beat I tried to give to Abstract Rude because I wanted to do a record with him. I wanted to produce a record for him. No one heard it. And I was just like, all right, well, I'm just going to do it. I'm going to rhyme over some bugged out shit and kind of tell y'all what the fuck it is and why y'all miss ISO Raw. And it just had like the weird sped up sample. It's like a Diana Ross sample, I think. And it's pitched up enough to where it just sounds bugged out, especially with the ding, 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 ding. The keys sound almost like harpsichord, but it's piano, I just love that beat. And I was like, this is something where I don't care what y'all do. Everybody needs one of these. If you just have one of these.
Well, it was kind of you not to call them out by name on the record. You just said crew, but
yeah.
but I guess now you called them out. So maybe I don't know. There's a statute of limitation on kindness, but
yeah. Well, he heard the record when it came out, and of course, he was like, "Damn, this beat is fire." And I was like, he did not remember the beat, and I was like,
wow.
"Fool, I tried to get this to you. You told me it was too weird to handle drums." And then he was like, damn, why didn't you give me this? I shut up.
He was not respecting your architecture at the time.
He was not. That's why the record came out, to let people know, like I knew what the fuck it was. But yeah, that record, it's a real raw record. I like records like that. I think that song is maybe only 2 minutes. It's like 2 16-bar verses or something. I love that. I like those like the punk rock Ramones thing, like the Ramones, them fools will hit you with, a minute and a half. It's intense as hell, but it's over when it's over.
Get in and get out. Exactly. Do the job and then get out of there.
Yeah. Because I remember I was coming off of these 5-minute songs on Adventures in Counterculture and, and with outros and intros. And I was like, nah, we just going to get in and get out, man.
This was, if I'm not mistaken, like the first record. It was sort of the first record that you put out after you left or stopped doing records with Rhymesayers. So this was, did this sort of feel like a new chapter for your own label, Weightless?
It did, but I really was kind of testing the waters. I wasn't sure how it was going to go, so when I made that record, it was like, I made that record because I had other records that were I was working on that were within the system that I was tentatively, we were looking at trying to do at Rhymesayers. And then I was like, am I capable of putting out any of these other records? Like the King No Crown record, the Vigilante Genesis record, and then the new Soul Position record. Those were the 3 records I was like, do I start with any of these? But I was like, nah, let me just make something that kind of reflects, my sensibilities now. And let me just test the waters. And that's what I want to do. I just kind of wanted to test the waters and see what was going on. Go through a whole album cycle and see, can I put together the promo, the tour, the music videos, the campaign in a way that I'm happy with? And can I make money, and what does it look like when I'm not in the system? And that record proved that I could do it on my own successfully.
It's crazy. I just remembered that I helped with one of the music videos that you did in Orlando. The Respect the Architect.
Respect the Architect. Yeah, you were you were helping us get it together, keeping Varys on point.
Yeah. What a job. I think yeah. Wow, that's crazy. I gotta revisit that. That totally fell out of my memory banks there. That's nuts.
Yeah.
You've put out so much, and you were able to cross over. You said that there was a point earlier in our conversation, there was a point where a lot of your contemporaries and peers stopped making records. They had to start getting jobs. They had to, kind of fall out of the game as the game evolved. You've been able to evolve and sort of change with the game. And part of that evolving is the fact that, to the chagrin, I'm sure, of some of your fans, and then to the delight of others, you probably are spending less time making music than you have in the last 10 years, or releasing music, I should say, but your productivity has not slowed at all. You're an author with, 4 books at this point now you have out?
Yeah, this is my 4th one. Yep.
You've got a podcast that's over 200 episodes deep. Do you sort of see yourself is this like a natural evolution of sort of moving beyond just doing music? Or do you think that these experiences are only going to add to your music catalog? What do you sort of see? Because that's a thing too that gets talked about a lot. We're sort of past the point of thinking rappers got to retire when they turn 30, because that's too old to make records. But where do you sort of see all of these new hats? Video director as well. You're getting into behind the lens and stuff. So where do you sort of see music playing into all of that? Is that something that you think about a lot?
Yeah, I think about it. I think for me, what I discovered years ago, like I say, when I wrote the first book, I think that was kind of my first time doing something outside of the hip hop lane, so to speak. So when I wrote the first book, I had this epiphany when I was like in the middle of it. And the epiphany was like, rap is just a medium. You call yourself a rapper, an MC, but what you are is a writer. And so whether you're writing books, whether you're writing outlines for podcast episodes, whether you're writing video treatments, all of these things are things that writers do. And as long as you have a story to tell, you can select which medium is the best for that story. And so the book, to me, there's certain things I can't do without books. I realized, like, okay, the story of Adventures in Counterculture, I never would have been able to tell that story in as depth if I didn't write the book about that. And blogging kind of helped me do that. And you know, and then also as I'm doing those things, I'm realizing like, okay, you know, we're going from the era where blogs controlled hip hop to where artists started blogging. And I started blogging during that transition. And I started seeing like, wait a minute, I'm sending all my traffic to these other people. But when I write blogs, this traffic is helping me sell things, you know? And so the more I blog, you know, I had a point probably in 2010, 2009, when I first started blogging, where I would probably blog 2 to 3 times a week. I had a whole monthly schedule. Sometimes I'd blog 3-4 times a week. I'd wake up and I'd write 1,500, 2,000 words a day, have it all mapped out. And then the more I wrote it, the more I saw like, yo, this is just building your platform. It's not necessarily separate because everything doesn't need to be put into a rap song, right? And I saw like, okay, the new job requirement of an independent artist is going to be that maybe you are responsible for your platform in addition to making good music. And so, you know, as I left the Rhymesayers situation, it was like, okay, well, you are now responsible for all of these things, you know, and I took over my Facebook page. It probably only had 10,000 followers, you know what I'm saying? And I just worked it and worked it and worked it and worked it. Now I got like 45,000, but it's like, they had it, but I didn't assume it was my job.
Right.
Like it's their job to get Blueprint followers on, you know, naively thinking that. Now I know, like, wait a minute, it's your job, sir. And whether it's podcasting, writing books, all of this stuff is just telling stories, you know, making movies. Like all I'm trying to do is just tell stories, the job of a writer. So now I look at it like, you're just a writer. And every time you got something that's worth telling, it's up to you to decide the best medium for that.
Do you understand the level of gems that just got dropped in this conversation, people? Gems, big gems. Huge shout out, thanks to Blueprint for appearing on the show. You can catch up with everything that he's got going on by visiting weightless.net. I'm loving the support that you guys are showing for Can't Knock the Shuffle. Be sure to rate and leave a comment on the show if you haven't done so already. Hit me up at can'tknocktheshuffle@gmail.com and let me know who you want to see on the show next, or connect with me at Sean Dammit, SeanDammit, on Instagram and Twitter. And make sure that you also check out my hip hop game show and sort of hip hop media outlet, The Questions, at The Questions Hip Hop on Instagram and Twitch. Till next time, peace.